Achoo! Hello, my excellent and perfect friends, and welcome to another in a series of videos celebrating the life of what is probably the darn finest handheld-only Nintendo console ever created. I am, of course, referring to the 3DS, aka the Nintendo Game Boy DS2. The little thing had its fair share of big hitters. Major IPs like Mario and Pokemon and Animal Crossing sold like gangbusters. But while that's all great for them, there were a few other 3DS games that I feel didn't get a fair shake. There are a number of reasons why these games didn't sell very well, and I'd like to talk about why I think each one deserves a second chance. These are games that I feel would have much better luck were they to get ported over to some other Nintendo platform. Perhaps one that's currently extremely popular? The Switch, for example, just off the top of my head. Keep in mind that I have not actually played a lot of these, and that might make someone think that I'm not qualified to talk about how worthy they are, but I think the opposite is true. It means that they're really appealing games with decent potential that just need to be released under different circumstances. I would like to play them, but more than anything, I would like to play them on my Switch with its better ergonomics and bigger screen and TV play, and with a few tweaks as well to fix some of the issues that brought the games down in their original releases. So, without further ado, here are 5 3DS games that just want another chance, coach! Let them out there, let them out on the field, they're pumped, they're ready! Just give them another shot, coach, they can do this! Did that joke land? I feel like it felt better on paper. The tale of Codename Steam is a sad one. People love to complain about how rarely Nintendo introduces new IPs. Well, this was a legitimate, brand new IP, and it was developed by Intelligent Systems, one of Nintendo's most skilled second-party developers, responsible for the likes of Fire Emblem and Paper Mario. Sadly, it only sold a couple 100,000 copies, which is probably a terrible return considering how high the quality of the game appears to be. Quick note, I know VG Charts isn't a 100% definitive, accurate source of sales, but it's generally close enough for the sake of conversation, so I'm using it for this video. Codename Steam has a very bizarre concept. Abraham Lincoln, along with several characters from classic literature, have to fight off an alien invasion in a steampunk world. Yep. Aliens, steampunk, and all the depressing books that make you read in high school. More importantly though, it uses a very interesting mix of turn-based strategy and real-time movement and weapon aiming. The distance you can travel and what you can do is determined by how much steam you have, and a great deal of the strategy comes down to conserving enough of it to set your characters up like traps for enemies that wander within their line of sight. Then all the characters seem to have really distinct and interesting weapons and special attacks. It just looks like a neat experience, and one that Intelligent Systems put a lot of love into developing and refining. So 2 questions we must ask ourselves about all of these games are, why didn't people buy it, and why didn't I buy it? Well, as far as the former goes, I can only make an educated guess. It could simply be that the style and overall concept just didn't resonate with people. It's definitely true that Nintendo's IPs usually have a certain Nintendo-y style about them, and this steampunk comic book kind of thing is very different. It doesn't feel very Nintendo-y at all. But I think a really big thing was that it was an untested concept. New IPs are always a risk because you just don't know if the audience will find them fun, and maybe people just didn't know if they would like this game. It did have a demo, apparently, so that should have helped, but maybe they still weren't sure if the concept would carry a whole game, or maybe lots of people tried it and just plain didn't like the gameplay. Could be a combination of things, I don't know. But what about me? I will say that the style didn't grab me. I think steampunk is pretty cool, but the rest was just kinda whatever to me at the time. And I thought the gameplay looked interesting, but just not quite interesting enough to make the purchase. I actually did mean to try out the demo, but I guess it never happened. The game just kinda came and went, and I feel like that was the case for a lot of people that might have liked it if they'd just tried it out. Because the more I've looked into it, the better it looks. And I think giving the game another chance on the Switch could help it reach a whole lot of people that didn't quite make the effort to check it out the first time around. Better graphics would of course be great, expanded multiplayer options would be even better, like the ability to do split screen on the TV. In fact, many 3DS games were hurt by the need for each person to own a system and a copy of a game, so easier local multiplayer would be a much easier sell. No screen peeking. The biggest thing though would be a budget price. $40 at retail was a little tough for such a new concept, but $20 on the eShop, I bet you anything it would sell at least as much as it did on the 3DS, if not substantially more. I know I'd give it a go at least. I have never played Ever Oasis, but I will say that I have always thought it looked like a lot of fun. It was created by the director of the Mana series, and many consider it something of a spiritual successor. It was also developed as a whole by Grezzo, who are known for porting a lot of Nintendo games to the 3DS, and I think it's great that they got another opportunity to stretch their legs and do another full original game here. I'm not able to find a concrete answer, but it at least seems like Nintendo funded the game entirely and owns the IP, and if so, there you go. This is another brand new Nintendo property. Sadly, it didn't sell super well either. Another few 100,000 by the look of it. And that's a shame, because it's another one that seems to have been made with a lot of love. The game has you building and upgrading a town, Arlo-like, and you do so by going out and raiding dungeons to collect materials, Arlo-very-like. Basically, it seems like an action RPG with some town and management sim elements, and from what I've read, it sounds like it has a very fun feedback loop. The whole idea of improving the town, which makes you more powerful, then going out to fight monsters and get more stuff to improve the town with, then improving the town, etc., sounds very engaging. The game reviewed pretty well too. There were some negative ones, as always, but a great number of publications and players seemed to think it was just delightful. And I'm sure having a super colorful, cute visual style didn't hurt the game either. I remember first seeing it and being impressed by how polished the game looked. So again, we must ask, what happened? Why didn't it sell more? If there are reasons related to the game itself, I can't put my finger on what they are. The 3DS was a terrific platform for JRPGs, and plenty of them were successful. All this seemed like a recipe for success. So you know what I think it was? The timing. I firmly believe that when the Switch released, it put a permanent damper on how well the 3DS's games could sell. It just made the 3DS feel like old news, maybe even on a subconscious level in a lot of cases. Even people who didn't have Switches yet were much less interested in buying 3DS games in my experience. I saw comments saying as much all the time in 2017 especially. It's just what happens when a new system comes out. And Ever Oasis released smack dab in the middle of the Switch's first year on the market. In fact, most of the coverage came during E3 2017, when everyone was buzzed more than ever about all the crazy new Switch games. Because of this, the game's eventual release just sort of slipped under the collective radar. Personally, part of the problem was that I'm kinda cheap, and I rarely pay full price for a retail game unless we're talking about a series I'm super duper stoked for, or I'm planning on reviewing it. In this case, it looked cool, but I just had too much other stuff to play and to do. Because again, that Switch thing, 2017 was a whirlwind of Switchiness, and all my other systems collected a decent amount of dust that year. If they remaster Ever Oasis and slap it on the Switch though, especially if they offer it at a budget price, I will snatch it up in a heartbeat. Even if they don't, I might just end up grabbing it on the 3DS one of these days, but I would much prefer the higher resolution and more comfortable play the Switch affords. Here's one of the games on the list I have played, and the one exception that got me digging my 3DS out of the drawer in 2017. Samus Returns is a remake of Metroid 2, which had been due for a remake for years. It also marked Samus's first 2D outing in, checks watch, 13 years! Especially when paired with the announcement of Metroid Prime 4, this was a pretty exciting title. While it would end up disappointing some purists who dislike the new melee system, among other things, overall it reviewed great, better than the other games on this list so far. Myself, I loved it. Sure, it's a good deal more linear in overall structure than most Metroids, but there's a lot of freedom within each individual area, and there are enough power-ups and secrets that it really scratches that Metroid itch that itches so badly. It itches so badly, it's terrible. And really the gameplay is just really good. The controls feel fantastic, better than any other 2D Metroid in my opinion. And I love the new melee system and full aiming radius. And in that more subjective, probably fleeting kind of way, it's just great to play a new Metroid. When I'm playing the game, so much of my enjoyment comes from that. It's just a new Metroid that I am playing, and that's amazing. Whether or not this game was a sales success is kind of unclear. Estimations put it somewhere around the 500,000 mark. Could it be more with digital sales? Or could it be even less and this number is inaccurate? And it's impossible to know how much money was spent on its development or how many copies it needed to sell to make a profit. But even if sales weren't as bad as they could have been, we can be sure that things also could have been a lot better. Especially considering how vocal the Metroid fanbase is about wanting new titles, one would hope the return to 2D Metroid would generate a lot of buzz and get a lot of units moving. So once more, we must ask ourselves,
What happened?
one could argue that maybe, at least in part, this was the dreaded Metroid curse. Maybe the series just isn't that viable in the general market, despite its hardcore fanbase. But I think it's not so much that people don't like Metroid, and more that they're not familiar enough with Metroid, and that this wasn't exactly the best way to reintroduce the series for the following reason, which is the primary reason that I think this game didn't do great. Once more, it's the timing. It was 2017, the Switch was selling like crazy, and even people who didn't have Switches were already feeling more and more detached from their 3DSs. It came real late into the thing's life, which put it at an unfair disadvantage. There just wasn't as much buzz for it as there could or should have been. And hey, I'll admit, maybe I'm completely wrong about this whole idea that the Switch killed the last great games on the 3DS. Or, of course, these cases could have all been caused by combinations of different factors, some of which I don't even know. I can't know for sure, but if I'm right, I'm pretty sure I know the solution to this unfortunate issue, and it's just put the game on Switch, please. Sure, it would take some work to pretty it all up, but Samus Returns on the Switch would be way more exciting than it ever was on the 3DS. It would be the first HD Metroid game. It could utilize the second control stick, maybe automatically engaging free aim without the need to hold a button. And hey, a really big percentage of the Switch's user base is people who have been out of the Nintendo loop for generations. So right there, you might get a ton of people who wanted to play Samus Returns, but just didn't have 3DSs to play the game on. If they did a good job on the port, I'll bet Nintendo could even charge the full $40 for it instead of making it a budget title like I've suggested for the other games so far. 60, probably not, but 40, yeah. With the right marketing push, I think they could generate a lot of buzz and finally give the game the chance it deserves. Nay, the chance it needs. Metroid has been in a bad place for a long time, and this game was supposed to help that. So while I'd love to play Samus Returns in HD and all that, more than anything, I wanted to have another chance to reignite interest in the series and prove that it is viable. So I don't know if a remaster will ever happen, but I can keep my fingers crossed and hope. I don't have a ton to say about Kid Icarus Uprising that I didn't already say in my video on 3DS games that deserve sequels. It's a giant adventure helmed by Smash Master Masahiro Sakurai himself. It's split into on-rail airborne shooting sequences and free 3D movement sequences on the ground. The game uses a really intriguing wager-based difficulty system and a deep weapon crafting system. Then of course it features a fun story with loads of silly fourth-wall breaking dialogue between its characters. It's just a really high-quality game, one that almost seemed too big for the 3DS, like it deserved to be on something more powerful. Out of all the games on this list, Kid Icarus Uprising sold the most. It cracked the million mark by a decent margin, and as always, we don't know how much Nintendo spent on it, but it feels like overall a million copies seem to be the magic number for 3DS games. I wouldn't be surprised if it was at least an okay success. But if you ask me, it deserved to be more than an okay success. So much love was put into it that it deserved to become one of Nintendo's big continuing IPs, rather than a one and done, let's go back to Smash now and never look back thing. And I know it could have been bigger if it weren't for one major thing. The controls. The game uses the circle pad for movement and the touchscreen for aiming. Then of course you've got to use the shoulder and face buttons, and the whole thing definitely works, and plenty of people had no problem with it, but there is no denying that it is pretty cumbersome. So much so, in fact, that the game shipped with a little stand for your 3DS so you don't have to hold it up while your hands are occupied with all these inputs. It does help a bit, but I've got big hands and an original tiny model 3DS, plus I'm left-handed, which means I have to aim with my bad hand or move around using the face buttons, which makes it even more difficult. I am pretty darn certain that the controls were a barrier to entry in this case. I saw loads and loads of people who just weren't interested in playing a game like that on their 3DS. The game felt too much like it wanted to be more than a handheld game, and its playability and accessibility suffered for it. So, what would give the game a better chance at success? Proper controller support on the Switch. Left stick to move, right stick to aim. Simple, intuitive, comfortable. Now, I do understand that this would change the gameplay quite a lot. Using your stylus like a mouse is a lot more speedy and accurate than aiming with a stick. They might have to adjust the difficulty somewhat, though the whole game is already used to scaling its difficulty constantly, so maybe they could just bring everything down a few notches or something. An option for gyro aiming could work too. It wouldn't be quite as accurate, but it wouldn't be a bad alternative. It would take some tweaking, but I absolutely think it can be done. And yeah, it's a big game, so it would take a good amount of work to remaster it as well. But they put so much effort into the game in the first place, I feel like not going that extra step and selling it to Switch owners is doing it a disservice. It's a huge waste of potential. Plus, those epic backgrounds and crazy giant boss battles would look terrific on the TV. And plus, the game has a deep multiplayer mode that would be great for playing online. So come on, Nintendo, give the game a chance. I'm begging you here. I'm begging you. Bear with me. You gotta bear with me here. I know I have expressed some strong opinions about Metroid Prime Federation Force in the past, but we gotta be clear here. I never thought it would be a bad game, even from the initial reveal. I felt that it was the wrong Metroid game for Nintendo to make at the time. They went so long without giving us any Metroid games at all that it felt so superfluous, so tone-deaf to give us a weird spin-off with a weird chibi art style. All the petitions and insane frothing rage were absurd, of course, totally. But I stand by my opinion that context is indeed important, and that there was nothing wrong with being disappointed by the game's existence, especially when you consider that it was developed by Next Level Games, another of Nintendo's best second-party developers. If Nintendo was going to put Next Level Games to work making a new Metroid, why on earth wouldn't it be a regular one, like we were all starving for? The wasted potential is so massive, it's staggering. And it's no surprise that the controversy had a negative impact on sales. They were bad, folks. Really bad. There were reports that the early sales in Japan numbered around 4,000. Nope, you heard me right. Not 40,000, not 400,000, 4,000. 4 digits. And overall, it doesn't look like the game even cracked 200K. But you know what? I don't just think it was the controversy. The controversy didn't exist simply because the game wasn't exactly what we wanted. Weird experiments have worked in the past. A big part of the problem was that it just wasn't a game that looked like it was worth spending money on. And that, I think, led to bad sales more than anything. Federation Force is a co-op game, pure and simple. You can technically use drones or something to help you go at a mission alone, but it doesn't sound like this is very fun, and it throws off the difficulty curve tremendously. It's just a worse experience in single player. But if you want to play it with 3 friends as intended, surprise, surprise, they've all got to have their own 3DSs and their own copies of the game. No download play here. Combine that with the controversy and the game was doomed to fail from the start. Some people like to blame unreasonable fans for killing an otherwise deserving game, but I firmly believe that the game was a bad business decision in the first place. Hindsight's 20/20 and all that, but it seems really silly that Nintendo didn't see any of this coming. It seems silly that they thought this was a viable game to develop. But I'm getting off track here. The point is, despite everything it had going against it, Federation Force looks good. Next Level Games is a fantastic developer, and it's clear that a ton of love and effort went into the game. Even if the chibi art style doesn't fit very well in the Metroid universe, the graphics are outstanding. The gameplay also looks great, and the missions and different mechanics and all that sound like they're well crafted. This is a full-fat Nintendo game. You might even say something of an ambitious one. And you know what? I want to play it. I want to play through its missions. I want to experience the bits of post-corruption Metroid canon it has to offer. I want to enjoy all its mechanics and monsters and robot suits and whatnot. There was no way I was ever going to find friends to play it with on the 3DS, and playing online games on my 3DS never felt really reliable or even desirable, but 4-player split screen on the TV would solve everything. And even just Nintendo's relatively better online service now would help if I did want to play it online. Don't forget traditional controls either. This is a shooter on the 3DS, meaning your options are second circle pads or C-sticks or gyro aiming. And I love gyro aiming as a supplement, but without a comfortable second stick to move the camera with, it's not nearly as comfortable. So now that the hate has died down, we've all distanced ourselves from the controversy a bit and had time to chew on things, Nintendo released Samus Returns and revealed a new Metroid Prime for Switch. I think it's time for them to bring this game out into the light again. Give it a fresh coat of paint, make its multiplayer more accessible, make it more comfortable to play. I still don't think it would be a huge hit or anything. Any primarily co-op game is going to be at a huge disadvantage, but it would give Next Level Games another chance to show off their work. It would give the game a chance to stand as an entry in the Metroid canon, and it would give us all a chance to have some fun that maybe we missed out on the first time around. And there you have it. Do you agree with my picks? Are there any other games that you feel deserve fresh Switch remasters? Or should the past remain in the past? Once a failure, always a failure? No second chances in life? That's a terrible philosophy to live by. You should change your attitude.